Ben, and I'm going to tell you a story of a kid in the Bible in less than 60 seconds. Let's go. David was the youngest of all Jesse's sons from the land of Bethlehem. And this kid grew up to be an amazing king. But first, it started as a shepherd boy. He watched sheep. That's pretty low, right? Well, not David. He rescued sheep out of a lion and a bear's mouth with his bare hands. Get it? Bare hands. And he went on to defeat the big giant with just a slingshot and a stone. David was pretty awesome. And he did. He grew up to be an amazing king of Israel. But it started as a kid. He did mighty things, and all that stuff that he learned as a kid made him who he became as an adult, as the king of Israel, the greatest king of Israel, a man after God's own heart. Think of it, I'm going to tell you a Bible story in less than 60 seconds, and it's about a kid. A kid in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 5 was a little girl. We don't know her name. It doesn't mention her name in the Bible, but I do know her daddy, and her daddy's name was Naaman. Naaman was very respected by the king. He had leprosy. Leprosy was a disease of the skin that was not fixable at the time. But Naaman's daughter, she had heard that there was this prophet named Elijah that could heal him, that could take those and fix his skin problem. She believed, and that was awesome. If you believe in God, you can do mighty things too. Why? Because faith is powerful. God is powerful. So believe in Him. Big Ben, I'm going to tell you a story of a kid in the Bible named Daniel in less than 60 seconds. That's right. You know Daniel, the one that got thrown in the lion's den? Well, it goes way back to Daniel chapter 1, where Daniel and a couple of his buddies were taken by the king. The king was going to feed them all this fancy food, the same food that he fed all the people that were in his group of people that were awesome.
Daniel said, hold on, wait a minute, I don't want it.
So the king agreed, and the king fed him all these vegetables and water, and Daniel believed, and he came through, and it was awesome. And at the end of it, he chose Daniel to be a part of his group. Why? Because Daniel remained faithful to what Jesus called him to do. How many times do we think all this temptation from this world, all these great things that are going to be fed to us are worth it? Not if it's going against what God tells us to do. Pick up in, and I'm going to tell you a Bible story about the youngest king ever. His name, Josiah. In 2 Kings chapter 22, it says, check this out. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king. Whoa. That's pretty young. The king at 8? What is that? Josiah. Well, as Josiah became king, they were doing some renovations, and they found this book of the law. As he was looking at it, he started to read it, and he decided that everybody should start obeying God's law. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Obeying God is always the right thing to do. And Josiah started teaching everybody and reading the law so that everybody could start obeying God. Even at the age of 8, Josiah was changing his country. What can you do at your age? I bet you can do just as amazing stuff as Josiah. Pick it in, I'm going to tell you the Bible story in less than 60 seconds, and it's about a kid. His name, I don't know, we'll call him Little Kid with the Food. And in John chapter 6, it talks about how Jesus asked this little kid for his lunch bag. His lunch bag had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. And there were over 5,000 people sitting there listening to Jesus preach. But lunchtime was happening, and they were starting to get hungry. So Jesus took that boy's lunch, and he broke it into little bits and pieces, and he started asking the disciples to pass it out. Well, the disciples kept passing out all this food, and everybody got to eat. That is a miracle. 5 loaves of bread, 2 fishes, 5,000 people and more? Whoa! That's a lot of food. Fun fact, there were leftovers. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you know that He can do anything with anything? Pick it Ben, I'm going to tell you a Bible story about a kid who got stuck at a temple for a long time. His name? Jesus. In Luke chapter 2, we see that Jesus' parents every year went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. And as they were leaving, they took off, and it was a bunch of people, and they were traveling back home to Nazareth, and they realized Jesus wasn't with them. So they turned around and went back to Jerusalem. But guess what? Jesus was hanging out in the temple, teaching and preaching to all the religious people. When they finally found him, it was about 3 days later, they were like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Did you not know I was gonna be in the Father's house?" As a kid, we should be able to talk about God all the time. Why? Because we love him. He's here, he's in your heart, and he wants you to spread the good news. So just like Jesus, we should get lost in talking about God's word to anybody, to everybody. Hey, Ben, and I'm going to tell you a Bible story in less than 60 seconds, and it's about a guy named Timothy. Timothy was a young kid, and we know that because in the book of 1 Timothy, they talk about how don't let anybody look down upon you because you're young. Silas and Timothy, they traveled the world together. They were companions, they were buddies, and Silas brought Timothy along to help preach the gospel of Jesus. Silas was telling people about Jesus, and Timothy was watching him very closely. And when Silas got in trouble and got thrown in jail because he was telling people, the wrong people, about Jesus, Timothy continued to tell people about Jesus. And he traveled, and he traveled, and he traveled, and he told people about Jesus, and everybody's life was changed. As a kid, we have a job to do. Even if we're young, we can still tell people about Jesus. We can be a light in the darkness. So, you got a job. I don't care how old you are. Pick it in, and I'm going to tell you a Bible story about a kid named
Samuel.
He was listening one night, and he heard this voice,
Samuel!
He's looking around, had no idea.
Samuel!
He was looking around, still had no idea. Eventually, he figured out that voice
Samuel!
was God calling his name. He listened, and God told Samuel to do mighty things for him. Samuel grew up to be such a wise man. But he listened to God, he obeyed God, and he did what he said. Fun fact, Samuel eventually grew up to choose David. Remember the kid we talked about just a few days ago, the one who became the greatest king of Israel? Man after God's own heart? King David. But Samuel listened to God and obeyed his commandments, and he became such a wise kid.